Okay, so then you can send it to me after.
Yeah. So continuing on what we were talking about with extended playing techniques, for instance,
Yeah.
again, normally those things are only taught at a very advanced level of playing. You
Mm.
get to quite a level and they start looking at extended techniques that can be done from the beginning. In fact, in some ways it's easier because you can make a lot of noise on an instrument, you can use it percussively, you can um, there's so many things you can do that are not normal, correct classical playing to have to start the whole realm of extended techniques, and every instrument's different in this way. So you have to understand um, what the each instrument capabilities are
Mm.
according to the person's ability level. So for beginners, again, they can do all sorts of extended techniques on the instruments. Like you said, with piano, you can be playing inside the sound box on the piano with with pieces of metal or wood or whatever.
Yeah.
Normally, only for you see that in very complex contemporary scores. So why not introduce that to beginners as well? And improvisation, telling stories with extended techniques, is fantastic. Fantastic fun. It sounds great, and it adds to the creative palette. I think the other thing about it is that with extended techniques, and for anyone who's played any extended scores of extended techniques, it's not always that easy to read a score and play it. It takes a long time often to really assimilate all the what each of the symbols mean and how long for and the dynamics and all these things. And often learning new techniques is quite difficult and require a lot of practice. Now, if people are exploring extended techniques improvisationally, they're just finding out things and then using sounds they like in the way that they like. Their ability to play is far in excess of their ability to read normally at that stage. So they may be quite an elementary reader of, of a score, but as soon as they start playing extended techniques just in a listening and improvisatory way, it can be quite complex what they come up with if you were to actually write that down. And there's no way they could have read that from a score, but they could actually produce the music without the score to the same degree of complexity. So this is something I think opens a door creatively, especially for less accomplished players, to be able to be involved in using extended techniques in creative ways, which otherwise they would have to wait till they were far more advanced to be able to read a score and practice learning all those new ways of playing. It's a lot of things are just available immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, I also often have the feeling for composers it would be much more easy if they just instead of notating, in new music, in modern music, modern classical music, you have this or contemporary music, sorry, you have these very detailed descriptions. Okay, now you place the bow here and you play like quintuplets, whatever over this amount of bars in that tempo, and you could rather just tell them, okay, improvise in, like, give them mood descriptions and maybe a tempo, like say fast, angry, and give them emotions to work with, and tell them, okay, improvise here in that style, instead of notating everything in a very detailed form that might even have better results if you leave it to the performer to improvise there on his own.
That can
Sometimes, like maybe not in all occasions, but sometimes I have a feeling it would also make it easier for the composers.
I think so, and also for the performers.
Yeah,
But then again, then you don't get the composer isn't really in control then of what the performer's doing and may not get the same message across. But then, and there's certainly a time when when that would matter. And I think there's going to be times where that doesn't matter. So again, it's not about having a black and white answer, but it certainly opens a door for a much more collaborative approach.
yeah.
And it also means when people are playing extended techniques, they're free to use all their energy to listen and interact with the other musicians, rather than the score is so complex, you're almost completely absorbed in just translating the black and white notes on the page to all the details and instructions into sound.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that's also what I often see as a big wall that stands between the musicians and the music. Actually, is that yeah, if scores are very difficult, if you play in an ensemble and everybody's just like into how can I play this perfectly, like I can't do this, and or they maybe in the end everybody manages, but then the goal has been reached in just playing the rhythm and the melodies and everything correctly, but still there wasn't room enough to really explore the music to really start working and to start translating these scores into actual music, into sounds that carry emotion with them. Yeah.
For sure, absolutely, for sure.
Okay, let me go now dive into a completely different topic, because I told in the beginning it's also about using modern day technology in teaching. So I would like to ask you, for the classroom, for your students, and also for yourself, how do you use the technology that is available to us for performing and for teaching? For learning yourself also, if you use anything like any technological tools to study music for yourself, I would be curious, and also to teach it to others, and in performative settings also.
Okay, so for teaching, I don't use technology if I'm teaching acoustically, with just unamplified instruments,
Yeah,
except if it was long distance like this, with Zoom. So I
yeah,
guess using technology. But even then, you see, it's important that whoever's using the technology really understands it. And my experience is a lot of classical musicians don't have a background in audio engineering. I'm lucky because I have a background also playing in bands, and we had to understand all the bits about microphones and know
yeah,
how to record and all these sort of things. So to have even a good quality lesson, just playing normal repertoire on Zoom, to get the sound good so you can hear the student well and they can hear you well,
it's
you
not
need
easy.
to know what you're doing and have the settings right. So that's a small detail. In terms of using technology in the instrument process, like amplified sounds, I guess, is the beginning of that, or recorded and looped, using microphones from an acoustic instrument.
Yeah,
Um, that sort of thing, knows the very large possibilities. We can have everything from, well, which has been done since the 1950s, where you're playing with a background track of sound recordings. Cage and many others did this sort of thing back in the 1950s, where they had sounds and the performer would play, and keeping a careful track on the time, they would be playing parts on their score that would correspond with what was recorded on this, maybe industrial sounds or something on a tape.
yeah,
So there's that side of it. But I think the most common thing now is that people are using technology very interactively. So there might be a microphone on the violin or the cello going into some kind of processing where it might simply be a delay, a very long delay of maybe 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And the musician's job is to play certain parts of the score at certain times, so that with however long the delay is, it all works to the outcome that they had planned. Yeah. So there's that. There's that. I do use that, and I do teach that certainly. And in an improvisatory context, again, it's great fun. It adds a whole other dimension to it. It's different from playing in an ensemble. Some people say, well, why would you have a loop station or looping technology if you could get another violinist or a cellist to play with you? That's true in some ways, but I think that, excuse me, that misses a point, because playing with looping and these sort of delay technologies, it's an art form in itself, and it has a very different atmosphere and a very special feeling of its own. So they're both possibilities. I don't think they're better. I don't think one is better than the other. So certainly I use the delay style idea with improvisation and performance. I use looping, where it can be a very tight loop or a very long loop, a very delayed loop or a very immediate loop. In terms of other technologies, obviously we're a long way ahead of history here. There have been people experimenting with electric violins, we know now, since the 1890s.
Really?
Over 130 years, people have been designing and experimenting with electric strings. And I can give you more materials about that from a friend of mine who's doing a PhD on it, a very knowledgeable fellow in Oxford.
Okay.
So the phenomena of using an electric instrument should not be big news. It is, unfortunately, big news in the classical world, but I think it's probably not a very sound opinion to have these days, because it's been around for so long. So using an electric violin either just as an instrument, as a particularly unique instrument, so you could be playing with an orchestra and you have a soloist with electric violin, perfectly legitimate, and I do that. I think that's got its own particular place. That the electric instruments occupy a unique place as an instrument. It's not just a louder violin, it's an electric violin. It's completely different. Just like if you have a Spanish guitar or you have a Fender Stratocaster, it's not just an amplified guitar, it's a whole other instrument. Yeah. So I think being aware of this is very important, that electric instruments are not just amplified acoustic instruments, they are a new instrument. They share common properties with the old instrument, but they are a new, unique instrument. So yes, I use electric instruments, I use amplified instruments, I use looping technologies, I use all sorts of sound processing technologies, such as different types of distortion. Great area of study, often a very underappreciated area of study for classical players again. They just think, oh yeah, distortion, you push a button. There's so many different sorts of distortion, just even technically how it's produced. Certainly the more ambient effects like phasing and flanging and the chorus and all these sorts of things. So I use all of these things. I've got about 40 pedals. I prefer pedals. I don't like the digital interface with the screens. I like just pedals where I push buttons. So I use a lot of those effects from time to time. Delays, reverbs. I use extended playing techniques quite a bit in conjunction with that, because you can pick up sounds. You can have an extended playing technique on an acoustic instrument. No one's going to hear it much.
Yeah.
As you amplify it or use an electric instrument, it's like a movie soundtrack. It's huge. So there's many ways of using technology as a performer. In terms of education, I encourage people to, and I give lessons and incorporate this into classes where we work with technologies, but I make sure it's done in a way where the people really understand what that particular technology is capable of and why they're using it. So that's why I always discourage people from buying multi-effects units, because they start switching everything on. I suggest they buy, the first thing is a loop pedal, so they learn to get their rhythm sorted out. Because if you've ever tried playing loops and if your timing's not really, 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 really good, you end up with the loop not quite the right length, or unless you're using one of the time set ones like on Ableton, etc., where you can program exactly the length.
Yeah.
If you're just doing analog pedal, switch on, switch off, there's an enormous education in that, actually, in terms of people's coordination and playing and listening. And
Yeah, it's difficult.
really, yeah, I'm
It is
sure you've
nice.
had that experience.
Yeah.
And so so the loop pedal is normally where I start people off, and it's heaps of fun, especially for younger students. They often love exploring that, and it gives them effectively a friend to play music with if they're stuck on their own with
Yeah.
their violin or cello, etc. They can do looping, and they can build layers. It's a bit like having an ensemble.
Mm.
But at the minimum, it helps them have a backing track that they could then play along with, which has, again, great value. Now, of course, backing tracks we can download or make. Just go on YouTube and put in backing track in G, and there's hundreds of them. So I encourage all of those things, and I use them in classes. So we go looping pedal, and then I normally go into the ambient effects like reverb, get them to really explore what reverb is capable of for a month before they try another effect. And this is the thing, multi-effects, everyone's running everything at once. They don't really understand the magic of each effect and then how they can be combined. So looping, ambient reverbs and delays, then things like distortion would be next on my list. Octaving, for sure. Quite early, we could even put that in straight after the loop. You could go into octaving and then the distortion and the delays and reverbs, and then the more what do we call it, the sort of more, forgotten the word now, ambient effects, like the chorus, etc. So this is how I approach it and how I encourage others to approach it in classes. In group situations, looping can be really good with people with a fair degree of discipline. For restless students, it's not a good activity, but for a group class with more mature students, they can really have to listen a lot more carefully and be more coordinated with their contribution to the loop, if you're having many contributions to a loop. And then learning to play with each of the effects. You can't play the same with a large reverb or a large delay as you would with no reverb or delay. If you play a very fast passage of semiquavers at a high tempo, you put that through a multi-tap delay or something, it can sound terrible depending on what effect you want to create.
Yeah.
But so learning that, normally in a performance situation, people need to learn about, it's not just playing the same thing and switching on an effect. The effect then becomes part of the instrument. It really becomes a part of the instrument, which then requires you to play in a different manner to express the feelings. So I think it's a very exciting and very positive contribution to music, the electronic side of things, and I would really encourage educational institutions to. And this is what we talked about a bit earlier. I'll jump in. Is that to be really relevant in the 21st century? I think, unless you're just going to be in an orchestra all your life or just teach in a school the traditional repertoire, I think we need to face up to the landscape of our times and educate ourselves and our students in these technologies because everyone just gets left behind.
Yeah, I I agree. But I have to say, like, one problem in that area is for me the cost of this equipment. Like, how do you, because I mean it's nice if you can, if some student can afford to get their own whatever pickup microphone that they can then connect to a loop station they also bought, plus free effect pedals they also got for themselves. But not everybody has the financial background to do that. Like, they are happy that they finally got themselves a violin, you know, and now they that's all they could invest in. And yeah, I wonder how do you approach students who would like to dive into these amplified areas of using their instrument but cannot really afford to get their own loop station, and you know.
Yeah, it's a very big question for many people. That's a good question, Gregor. Well, I think we're then starting to move in the area of how we support people from different socioeconomic situations,
Mm.
and who's uh, who do we include in that responsibility? Does it all fall on the teacher to provide all of that? It can, but I think it's an opportunity for us to look outside of just being musicians because we live we're a social animal. Humans are a social animal, and all of these inequalities that we're talking about are because of our behaviours. Someone's behaviour somewhere has advantaged some people and disadvantaged others. Some people, it comes down to their own personal development where people disadvantage themselves or advantage themselves. So there's many aspects, but none of that's really relevant when you're standing in front of a student and they would like to use this equipment and they don't have the money. Then there's a few ways around that where we can provide that in the studio when they come to their sessions, or the school can provide when they come for their sessions. It might be possible to have a loan system where the school or the university or perhaps a private benefactor could maybe have a music bank. You know, instead of a money bank, you could have instrument bank or pedal bank, um, effects pedal bank. So I think it's a question that we don't have answers for fully yet
Mm.
because it's a socio-economic situation. But it definitely moves us into the arena of how we cooperate as a culture socially. But certainly on the ground, yeah, I often have invited the students into my studio, and for their session, I've already set it all up and I explain them, so I can still teach them how to use it all while they're there.
Yeah.
Sometimes the schools are able to purchase equipment and let the students use it or borrow it. Um, it's a tricky area. I don't really have a lot of answers at the moment, and I've been fortunate in recent years where I haven't been in that situation with the people who've come to me, but I certainly have been in that situation in the past, and it can be very frustrating. And
Yeah.
so I think that's also, well, then there's an opportunity really to capitalize on what the student does have access to. So if they just have an acoustic instrument, let's explore lots of different ways of playing, different styles, different techniques like turning the bow over col legno and using it as a percussive instrument, um, getting all sorts of harmonics up and down the strings. So there's all sorts of ways, but yeah, short of being able to give people lots of equipment, it's a I don't really have any more answers.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess in that sense, also how I would imagine if I do this in the future, I guess the best way of doing that would be to have a space where you have all the equipment set up, and that everybody, maybe you have a couple of instruments that more than one person at once can play, maybe two people at once, so maybe it's enough two instruments that are connected to this set of pedals and the speakers, of course, the loop station, and that everybody gets a turn in trying, and the others maybe accompany them. If one person records a loop, the others could improvise to that, and then no problem, to let each person participating in the workshop maybe create one loop by themselves, where they have to be rhythmically accurate with, you know, hitting the pedal at the right point, activating, deactivating the loop, and then providing maybe the main rhythm for the whole group to join in a
Excuse me, Gregor, just excuse me. Sorry, I just had to get some water.
Okay, no problem.
Gregor, I'm going to have to sign off in a minute. I've got to get back to my conference.
All right, yeah, no problem. I think we
any other quick questions?
Yes, we covered most of it. The rest would just be maybe one last question. What are your hopes for instrumental teaching of the future of this century, and what is to come, and where do you see maybe potential disadvantages of what we talked about, like using technology and it becoming a more dominant factor in the world in general, distant teaching, online teaching, video courses, etc.?
Well, this is one of my favorite topics. I think that what matters above everything is the character of a person, and I think from there, kind of motivation, I think, for people playing music. And, a lot of people in education, not all, fortunately, but a lot tends to get caught up in what I call a sports attitude. Maybe we see this a lot in Australia, but it may be elsewhere as well. I can't tell yet. But I think it's all about creating a feeling with the music. And if we don't create something really special or moving or somehow life-changing, I think we're not really achieving everything that music has to offer. So
yeah,
I think you can, for this purposes, you can cut out any sophisticated instruments, any need for big expenses, any equipment, anything. Because at the end of the day, when someone goes to listen to music, if they could make that music themselves, they would. But the reason they put on a CD or they download something or listen on Spotify or go to a concert is because they're going to get something they can't get at home themselves. And the music the musician brings, I think it helps if the musician is conscious that this is what their real role is. You know, I was saying to a conference the other day, people talk about doctors and nurses and psychologists and social workers. They call that the caring industry. They say, well, these are the caring industries. Music and the arts are in the caring industries. And so when we see it like that, the only thing that matters is that we help people to feel more whole, more safe, more capable, more hopeful, more in touch with their feelings, more in touch with their life in ways which they can use in positive ways. And at that point, if you just had a plastic bucket and a stick, you can still make people feel better. You can make people feel excitement. You can make people feel thoughtful and stop and think about things. So it really doesn't the sophistication doesn't really matter, but we're beyond that. Obviously, we have instrumental programs and we have violins and guitars and pianos. So my hope is that we have teachers who really get this, that the humanitarian motivation behind playing music is the primary, most important thing.
Yeah.
And yes, we hope for excellence in teaching and being able to have good technique and all these things, but never at the expense of the humanitarian reason for standing in front of somebody and picking up an instrument. The second thing is that for education is that we have a very powerful message to the public so that the communities around the education will feel positive about supporting it, and they won't say it's okay to cut the funding for education and have no more music programs. If we have the support of the public, then they will support us when we say, hey, no, that's not all right. We need more funding. So this kind of thing we only have when we have a relationship with the public. And to do that, we need to be much more community orientated. So, you know, most musicians go through life thinking about the concert hall stage and being a brilliant soloist or having a quartet that wins competitions. I think we need to look at that again and be looking at how we can reach all of our community with our music. It doesn't matter how good we are. If we're really, really good, that's even better. We shouldn't ever feel like the community, we shouldn't ever feel like the community doesn't matter and we just want to get to the concert hall.
Yeah.
I think that's worked for a little while, but now the fallout from that kind of approach by the musicians, we're feeling very much now with the cutting of funding, because the community we're not involved in the community. They don't really have the care for the music and the arts. So now bridges with the community, I think, is a big key. And pardon me. So through that, a vision for the future, yes, that we have really good teachers who understand that, and they bring that as what music is. And yeah, there will always be someone who can do a solo and travel with an orchestra and all that. That's great. But even then, they can be doing it as well. And that way we will see a good future with strong support from the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I also hope so.
Yeah.
That we have these type of teachers also that see the importance in that and just bring music to the people to connect people. And
I'm sorry I have to go.
no problem. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your time, and it was great speaking to you and seeing you again after a long time.
Thanks, Gregor. We'll see you. Talk soon.
Yes, and good luck with the conference.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.